Having conversations with people that don't vote like you or think like you or post like you can be really challenging. In fact, often we choose to avoid it and just kick them out of our life. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. On this episode of the Live Faith First podcast, I talked to Monica Guzmán. She has written books about how we stay curious and humble and actually use conversations with people who don't think like us for our benefit and for theirs. So sit down and enjoy this episode of the Live Faith First podcast. Opposites attract. Now, that may be true in some relationships, but today the saying probably should be opposites are enemies. We huck stones at people on the other side of a multitude of divides. But what if we needed the opposite? And if we could just learn to hear, be curious, and calm-ish, we might get back to being better because of the people on the other side, not despite them. Well, we have Monica Guzmán with us today and help us figure out how the hearing and curiosity thing works when we cross divides. So Monica, are you ready for this?
I am ready. I'm here for it. Let's
All right,
go.
let's do this. Well, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you bet.
I tried to get you on the podcast during election season, which was not, it didn't happen, but I'm a patient person. I'm patient. So I reached back out and so grateful that you can join us and have enjoyed hearing you on other podcasts and reading your books. So I'm looking forward to this. A little bit later though, I need to hear the story of hanging out with your parents on election day, at least 2020, but I'd love to hear how 2024 went because your book was written before that. But before we get to that, give us the cliff notes of your life. Where were you born? Where were you raised? How did you get to where you are today?
I was born in Monterrey in Mexico, and we immigrated to the States when I was about kindergarten age. Ended up in New England, mostly grew up there. College in Maine, one of those liberal arts colleges. Hopped around the country in journalism jobs. Ended up in Seattle, where I've been, where I met my husband. We have 2 kids here, one of whom just got stung by a bee. I was telling Elliot before, she's okay. She's
Good.
got the baking soda. She's good to go.
No allergic reactions. You don't have to get the EpiPen. Okay,
it's
good.
just always an adventure. So I'm in that stage of life. My parents and I are politically very divided. We became citizens in the year 2000. They took the citizenship test. They skipped episodes of Seinfeld in the 90s to study up. And I was naturalized because I was 17 when they became citizens. And we just immediately went to opposite sides. And that has informed a lot of my life. The disagreements, the fact that coming home from college, from high school, from whatever I learned, I couldn't expect agreement at the dinner table. I just couldn't.
And you were with family, and for you, family was more important than political divides and opinions, it sounds like.
Well, I mean, it appears that we've been able to keep the family together for sure. I can tell you that moment to moment, I've definitely lived in moments where nothing was more important than getting agreement with my point of view, which is clearly the right one. So have we lived those moments? Heck yeah. Yeah,
yes. We have. So my next question was, did this come naturally to you as like that kind of bridging divides thing? So it sounds like you've had years of practice, but did it come naturally to you? Is like that part of something that you're like, I want to find agreement? Or has it been like, my goodness, I've had to learn a lot to get where I am right now? Yeah,
I've examined this in my own life, and I don't know that I have the exact right cocktail of what, this is in me, but I do know that having come from a different country and then grown up in the United States with that different culture, having one foot over there, one foot over here, never really feeling at home 100% in either place, I think did lead me to be a little more open to the idea of maybe some things just can't be resolved black and white. Maybe there is a gray area, and that has been part of how I conceive of myself for a long time. I went into journalism as a career, which I have loved, in part because I'm so fascinated by people. And I started off a really shy kid, really shy. I would yell and scream when my mother told me that I needed to go ask, the cashier at the Burger King for a salt packet. It was just scary. I didn't want to talk to strangers. But the mysteries that people carry within them, once somebody started telling me a story about something they loved, my shyness would just disappear. And there was something about how much I could learn from people and how little I could predict them that started to become kind of an obsession. And that's what led to journalism. I thought maybe I can help this world by being a, good old-fashioned journalist and helping people understand each other. And there's so much nuance and complexity to human beings. So, throughout my journalism career, there've been so many times where, especially early on, I had my assumptions, I thought I had the story, and then I went and met the person and realized I was completely wrong. And the truth is more interesting anyway. So why have assumptions?
Right, right. Now, I love that. And it's one of the areas where we get into trouble is because we do make people very, very flat. And then we use mediums to communicate that can be very flat. Texting, social media, email, I mean, all of those things. I would always, if I get into one of those email strings that it's the back and forth and the back and forth, and it's just getting hotter, the
Yeah.
further down you go, it's like, stop, pick up the phone. The
Yes.
person doesn't hear your tone. They don't hear your where you're coming from. And I'm not trying to be argumentative, but it probably is coming away across in the way I'm responding. And so, no offense, but let's just do it this way,
Yes.
or let me walk to your office and let's talk about it. And I think that's so important for us to remember that people are nuanced. So
Yeah.
even when we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but if we talk about political opinions, well, political opinions could be one thing, but opinions on a totally different subject, you could be very aligned on.
Yeah.
And when we lose sight that people have, they're nuanced, they have more opinions on different things,
Hmm.
it is intriguing. It's fun. And then I love the backstory, right? The story of, oh, how did you get here? How did you get to this point, why you're thinking this way? So, anyway, I love that. Now, I'd love to jump into this sorting, othering,
Mhm.
and belonging.
Mhm.
I think we kind of get it, but give me a 10,000-foot view. For those of you who want to know more, we actually interviewed John Powell,
Mhm.
gosh, a few months back. And so we went deep into sorting and othering and belonging and those types of things. But
Mhm.
today, Monica, if you could give us kind of like what is that sorting, othering, belonging? Give us
Mhm.
some, handholds to grab onto.
Yeah, so the fun acronym I think of is SOS, the call for help. And so for me, it's sorting, othering, and siloing. So sorting is the natural human tendency that we all have to want to be around people who are like us. That's how we build friendships. That's the easiest way communities are forged. Communities of shared interest makes sense. Then there's othering, which is the very natural human tendency to want to put distance between us and them. Well, who are they? Anyone who we deem different at a certain moment on a certain dimension. And research going back decades shows the differences don't have to be particularly meaningful for us to begin to subtly discriminate between us and them. And then the last one is siloing. And siloing is the stories you hear and don't hear with high fidelity. Because of the groups of people you're around and who you consider yourself to belong with and who you consider to be your opponents. So, altogether, the SOS, the sorting, othering, siloing, kind of conspires to um, narrow your worldview while convincing you see enough.
Yeah. And yeah, that's an interesting final statement you make there because we do think we've seen enough
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times when you're new to a subject, like, oh, I want to dig. We have an extra reptile tank in the house right now. So last Monday, I got deep into like researching
Mm.
geckos and like how do you build an aquarium for that and all of that. And my daughter comes out, she's like, "You're still doing this?" 2 hours later, I'm like, rabbit hole, full
Yep.
on rabbit hole.
Yep.
I am learning something. But most of the things that we interact with, especially if we have some amount of knowledge or comfort with, we can tend to think we've learned enough, right?
Yeah.
And that can cause trouble.
Exactly.
So if we have this SOS thing, this sorting, this othering, this siloing, how do we get around? How do we get out of those, or how do we get around people who are in a different silo or a different kind of group? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it can obviously look very different for different people in different situations, but these days, when we are so divided, it can take some courage because what you're doing is maybe you're asking a question about the other group, and maybe the people on your side are going, "Wait, you're asking a question? Does that mean you're on their side? Do we know you? Do we have to worry about you?" People are afraid of being judged by their own side. But what it looks like is first exposing yourself. So the sorting piece of SOS, we know that blue zip codes, to take the political divide as an example, are getting bluer. We know that red zip codes are getting redder. We really are sorting ourselves into like-minded groups. So the first step is just, can you even expose yourself to any difference at all? And if you can't do it in person, you sure as heck can do it online. But when you think about how we tend, if I take myself, right, and I'm in a moment of sort of partisan activation, and I'm looking online, and I'm looking at news, and I'm just letting my reactivity dictate where I'm going, then I'm going to find an article that's an opinion article about something that the other side believes that I vehemently disagree with. And I'm going to click on that article and I'm going to read it the whole time, just gathering ammo, right? Just, oh, what an idiot. This is terrible. Look how bad they are. Oh my gosh, right? That's the way we tend to read uh, other people's opinions when we are exposed to them in this more kind of divisive mindset. But if instead you find that article, you see that headline, and it activates you, and you know this is a widely held belief on the other side, but instead of clicking it and reading it looking for ammo, you click it and you read it. And instead, you ask yourself two questions. What are the deep down, honest human concerns that animate this perspective? And then the second question is, what is the strongest argument on this other side? Now, you're having this as an internal reflection, conversation with yourself. Nothing's at risk here. Nothing's
Right.
at risk. You're not in danger. There's nothing to your safety. You're just talking with yourself. So that can be a really good first step if you're not in a place that's more purple or more different or has a lot of variety. We have technologies that expose you to just about any difference. Can you build that muscle by putting your mind into that place and asking yourself, okay, let's be generous, right? Everyone who disagrees with me is not crazy, stupid, or evil. And everyone who opposes what I support cannot possibly hate everything I love. So what am I missing? What am I missing? Let me go look.
Right. Right. I love that. I love the idea of being generous, and because we not only do we tend not to, but it almost feels like you're giving in, like, ah, here I go, I'm giving into that argument. But to just, like you say, step back a second and just ask, are they addressing something that I care about? Okay, good. So we're at least on the same plane there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just trying to, again, put yourself in their shoes, better understand kind of some empathy there. Now, what do you do? So we both live on the West Coast.
Hmm.
We both live in urban environments. I live in San Jose. You live in Seattle, and so we are, definitely Democrat, communities here, right? What do you do if you're the odd Republican in that environment? Is there
Mm.
something that you do? Because I'll be, honestly, it can be a bit daunting when, like, dude, are they going to find out? Like, do they
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I allowed to even say that? So what do you do when you think when you're the minority when it comes to, we'll just do political, but what do you do kind of around that to, like, maybe when you're tempted to protect yourself,
Yeah.
but to still need to be generous to the other side? Do you have any tactics you use there?
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot of my friend Elizabeth, who lives on Bainbridge Island, not too far from me in Seattle, and she is a Republican in a very, very, very blue place. And I've been with her, I've hung out with her enough times where she talks about her coming out moment, the moment where she chooses to come out as Republican. Once, everybody starts talking, and it's just assumed, as it tends to be in very blue places like Seattle, that everybody agrees with whatever political opinion we're just kind of assuming everybody holds. And Elizabeth just has a lovely way of very confidently just stating, I'm Republican, or I voted Republican on this, or I see it very differently. Can I tell you what I mean? And just slowly, right, letting the cat out of the bag, and just to watch people's faces where they're like, and often people kind of freeze, because then everybody tries to be kind, right? And so the first thing people in the majority in that situation think is, did something I say offend this person, or did I
Right.
judge Republicans too much? you know? And Elizabeth has been there, done that. She takes it all in stride. Um, and so one of the things I've learned from her is it's important, I think, to have the courage to be yourself, and to speak, as freely as you can about what you really believe. There is nothing wrong with people disagreeing in a group. And what we feel because of sorting, dynamics, is we feel like it's an offense to the people we're around for us to be honest about what we think if we don't agree with them. Now, this happens to me all the time. Just the other day, I forget exactly what we were talking about, but I was in a group of people and they said a certain thing and assumed a certain thing. And I realized that if I didn't speak up in some way to the fact that I disagreed with that, they would basically unsee me. They would assume something about me that wasn't true. And it was important to me. It's important to everybody, I think, but it was important to me in that moment to be seen for who I was. So, what I do in those moments and what I did there was I just kind of register it. I just say, "Hey, for the record, I look at that really differently, or I don't really agree with that. I have a totally different take on that issue. We don't need to talk about that now, though. Pass the
Right.
salt, whatever." But at least
Right.
I've registered. I've
Yes.
checked in as different, and the invitation is out there. Sometimes I'll even say, if anyone wants to talk to me about that, let me know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. It's happened with our granddaughter, our granddaughters. They're in their early 20s, college,
Mhm.
and yeah, we stepped into a polarizing subject, and it was one of those where it was like, yeah, I think you and I probably see that oppositely. But
Mhm.
I get where you're coming from, but that's, we're on different pages on that one, and that's cool. But yeah, let's talk about that another time,
Yeah.
and it wasn't so much, actually, the reason I chose even to put it off, because we were having such a great conversation about so
Mhm.
many other good things that I wanted to talk about, that felt like I was going to be just derail that conversation. It was
Yes.
just derailing. And it's like, I'm
Yeah.
not looking to derail, but I also need to be clear, like, yeah, we're different on that one. We see that one different.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you pointed that out, because I do think that people, with some of these issues that are such high stakes or feel really heavy in our hearts, we're so afraid that a disagreement could like torpedo a relationship, or at least the dynamic in this conversation. But yeah, it's important to say you can just register the difference and move on. It does not need to disrupt everything. You don't need to hop into that argument immediately. And you certainly don't need to feel like, oh my gosh, I better have all the best arguments right here, right now, or I'm a bad, Republican or a bad Democrat, right? Don't worry about it. We're all humans.
Right, right. In fact, that's one of the reasons I dislike the political conversations is I don't feel adequately prepared to have the conversation.
Right.
I'm, by training, I was a pastor for 17 years. I have
Mhm.
masters in the Bible and all this stuff. So if we want to talk Bible, I feel super comfortable there. And it's funny because I don't almost ever feel threatened if you want to have a long conversation about God or the Bible or any of those, because I feel really comfortable and secure. And I also recognize that religion specifically is a journey.
Yeah.
Like, that's a journey, and this is not for you and I to debate over. I mean, yeah, if we want to, there's definitely debatable things. We can have those conversations, but a
Mhm.
lot of it for me is just conversational. But in the political arena, I don't have that same
Yeah.
confidence. And so it's interesting because even if I watch my emotions around, again, conversation around the Bible where I'm real comfortable versus one around politics, there's a certain point, if it's a debate back and forth, I just
Mhm.
get either frustrated and
Yeah.
want to walk away or do walk away or just kind of shut it down. And that, because I feel like I've met my limit. Now,
Yeah.
how would you address that when we get to that point where it's like my emotions are starting to ramp maybe, or the other person's are? Like, do you have any red flags you look for and like tips for us as we get to that place sometimes?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, first, to address something you said just now, I do think that a lot of times we feel like we have to know every detail about a political issue to be eligible for confidence or comfort talking about that issue. And one of the reasons I feel confident talking about political issues is because I've rejected that whole premise. I don't believe I need to be at all an expert on the issue for something about it to kind of call me in, for me to be implicitly a part, an eligible part of the broader conversation about it. That's what politics is. It's like the art and science of trying to figure out how to thrive together. A lot of times what activates people in politics is not like the fine print on the policy. It's how it makes us feel. It's the values inside of us that get activated. It's our concerns, that get activated by the issue or whatever feels controversial about the issue. And if you realize that that's what a lot of political disagreement is really about, then you can switch gears from thinking my confidence comes from expertise in the topic to my confidence can come from comfort exploring openly who the people are in this conversation relating to the values and concerns activated by this topic. It's completely different. Everyone is eligible for that conversation. Everyone. And so that allows me to, if somebody is really upset about something that's political, it allows me to go, I wonder what about the path they've walked through their life is activating them so much when it comes to this topic? Maybe it doesn't activate me as much. That's an interesting contrast. What can I learn from that? Right. And I go way far away from I need to be right. I need to look smart. And if we get into topic based, things where this person is sometimes the other person has like nothing but data, I don't have data, but I can still tell them, okay, I accept that. I could look that up later. I remain nervous about this aspect or that aspect. What do you have to say about that? Right? It's a mix of emotions and facts and knowledge and values. And I think when we try to say that it's all one or the other, the only good political conversation it's highly rational. And, it's a lot of facts and figures. It's like, well, then that means three people can have that conversation. I'm not into having that conversation. That's not very fun.
Right.
No, we're not all of us rational all the time. And so politics becomes a way to understand each other when the boundaries of what we think is right and wrong are tested. And we need to have those conversations because otherwise, how do we maintain a good society together?
Yeah, that's so good. That is so helpful. And it is an interesting mindset we get into. And I've likened it to we either get into the high school debate club piece
Yeah.
where
Yep.
it's like, you know what? I can win them over if I have a great opening, three great points in the middle and a great conclusion, then they will definitely be on my side and I win, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so we either get into that mode or we do get into the I have to win this conversation mode. Like if I don't win this one, that somehow I've failed, whether it's my people or myself. And those are the ones that I struggle with the most. I actually enjoy the political conversation. One of
Yeah.
my good friends, but we just sit and we'll just talk about it. We'll just go back and forth. There's no judgment. There's like, yeah, dude, but what about that? Oh, well, I see this, and he'll even be able to call out his own side and be like, dude, really? I remember us talking in November right after the election. He's like, and he voted for Trump, and he says, really, we're gonna rename the Gulf of Mexico? That seems a bit
Right.
over the top, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you think of that, if it's Gulf of America now, but whatever you think of that, I thought it was pretty funny because he's like, as much as there's reasons that I'm voting for him, there's also some pieces where I'm like, really, this doesn't seem necessary. What do you do when you engage with that person who has to win the debate? Is there a point that you walk away or do you,
Oh,
kind of wave the
yeah.
white flag? I mean, what does that look like
I
for you?
mean, definitely. Sometimes, there's people who really want to change everyone around them to agree with them. And you can kind of tell their prickliness if you don't agree with them. That can happen. And it depends on what your objective is in that conversation. If you have a really good relationship with this person, then maybe you want to wade in because maybe you can poke at it, challenge it. Maybe you feel you can be totally honest around this person and just, have a bout and just see what comes up. Sounds like you with your friend are pretty good at that. A lot of times, unfortunately, When people get into that headspace where they have to win, I mean, I've seen a lot of people have to apologize for how they behave when they're in that mindset, because they end up, you asked me in the beginning, does that mean family is always the most important thing? And I told you there are moments where I feel like the most important thing is getting my parents to agree with me. And in those moments, I will say and do things I regret. So, do you want to be in that tornado? Do you want to be in the realm of that tornado? No, you don't have to be. You absolutely don't have to be. But there are ways to bring people out of that tornado. So, I have found sometimes that, frankly, people sometimes just want to be heard. They just want to be heard. And maybe if it's not that important to me to prove myself right in disagreement with the person who thinks that they're right, then I can just listen. I can be interested in, wow, you seem really convicted of this. Where did that come from for you? And, well, they're happy to tell me, or tell me more about that. Because a lot of times when people are really convicted, sometimes they do know a lot about it, or at least something in their life is really profoundly pointing in that direction. And it can be really interesting to me, and it helps me like add color to that issue. So if I just take a curious mindset, no harm, no harm, no foul, right? If they poke at me and they want me to change and they're mad that I'm not changing, that's their problem. I am not going to fawn. I am not going to soothe them and their feelings at the expense of being who I am. I'm not going to do that. So if they can't seem to accept, or they keep provoking me and going, but why don't you? And then every time they come back to it, they say meaner and meaner things. How could you? Like, I just think only bad people would think that. Okay, you know what? I'm out. Like, that's it. Like, if you're there, you're swirling in your storm, and I can't, I'm listening, I'm being patient, I'm being honest, and you're still in your storm, and now that storm is throwing debris my way, like, I'm not going to stick around.
Yeah. 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 I love that. And I think that's in a lot of these discussions, it's like, well, it's either, the fight or flight. Either I have to get in and get my point across, or I have to run away from it. And what I hear you saying is, I'll use the word fight. I don't love that word here, but fight is okay. Like, have the conversation. And flight, though, when it becomes that abusive, or that, kind of those arguments that are about you personally, what kind of person are you because you believe that? Those are the moments where it's like, man, I gotta.
Yeah, exactly.
We're good, bro.
Here's another thing that really helps diffuse the other person. Because again, we can all be spun up into storms on different issues, right? And it's nice when somebody like brings us a little bit down to the ground, and then the conversation can get more productive. And one thing you can try, and I heard this named by my friend Bill Doherty, who's incredible at this, and he's a co-founder of Braver Angels. And he said, as much as you can with that person, sprinkle into your conversation, I know you disagree on this. I know you see this differently. Every time you talk about your point of view, remind them that you see that they don't agree, and that you respect and accept that. Because if you respect and accept it about them, they're more likely to respect and accept that about you. And stop being so like mean and aggressive and non-accepting of who you are. So you show them acceptance for who they are, keep sprinkling in. And once again, I know you see this differently, but I got to tell you how it comes off to me. Then people kind of settle down, because they're like, oh, this person sees
He's
me.
Listening.
It's okay. I don't need, because you start to get into that mindset that unless somebody agrees with you, you're not okay. Like, you can't be okay until this other person changes. And that's just a fallacy all the way down. But it feels true in our bodies, right? In our emotionally activated bodies. It feels existential in those moments to get the other person to agree with you. Otherwise, something is wrong with you. And that's just not true. we have to snap out of that,
Right. The opposite statement, and this is one you brought up in your book as well, is great, where you're like, I really agree with you on that. Like, that one we align on, even if we're disagreeing. And I actually used that the other day with somebody who we're having a different of opinion on one. Yeah. And I said, no, I think you and I are totally aligned on that one. Now, this part of it, and I could almost see the look on his face as, a little bit of a smile, a little bit of a nod, a little bit, okay, we're at least aligned there. We have that foundation. There's other pieces, and Elliot will explain it to me.
Yes, that's really, really good.
Tell me, Let's dig into curiosity a little bit. I want to go over to curiosity and asking good questions.
Mhm.
Tell us the power of curiosity and then listening. How does that help us in these types of conversations?
So much. It's everything. The way I kind of draw the whole problem is that we're so divided that we're blinded. All this research shows us that when one side looks at the other, and this goes both ways, there's rampant misperceptions, exaggerations of the extremity of beliefs or the prevalence of those beliefs. There's a lot of fear. We just see this over and over again. Even if people are really good at, the news quizzes on the events that are going on, they're really good at that. They've checked those boxes. They'll be severely misinformed about what the perspectives are for people who disagree with them. So we're not very well informed on those things. So in that world that's giving us, hyperbole and misperceptions are so rampant and we are siloed, and so we're around people who agree with us, who tend to intensify our own opinions. Research shows that too. What then is going to break that spell? And the only thing that breaks that spell is questioning your own assumptions about what other people think, asking questions of actual flesh and blood humans with those perspectives who can give you the story of those perspectives from a kind of primary source. It's just asking the questions. It's we know also from psychology that when you spend so much time in a certain point of view, surrounded by people who all share that point of view, it becomes invisible to you. You don't even recognize it anymore. It's just the way of the world. And not only that, you'll start to become disgusted with anything that doesn't resemble that. So this is just natural. This doesn't mean we're bad people. It's just we're flawed human beings. This is how we work. This is how our systems work. So it is incumbent upon us in a very divided world to check all those dynamics that are leading us to be so divided we're blinded with the courage to get curious, the courage to ask the question, and to have some comfort, to find some comfort knowing that it's okay to disagree. In fact, it's what we want. If everybody agreed here in the United States of America, we clearly wouldn't have a democratic republic. It would be a real problem, a sign of some, AI having taken over or some dictatorship, like having. That's not what we want. We want disagreement. And we can't have dishonest disagreement. We need honest disagreement. So right now, I feel like we're surrounded by kind of funhouse mirrors of what we actually disagree about. And the only way we're going to find out what we actually disagree about, it's not by going on social media and seeing the memes that sound really nice and righteous, but have very little bearing on the complexity of the issues. It's just by talking to each other. And there are ways to do it that are not that scary and that are a lot easier than we think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And it's a mindset. I mean, it really is a mindset. I like to talk about either the teacher mode or investigator mode. When we're in teacher mode, it's like I'm going to download all my info to you and you're going to learn and you're going to listen and you're going to give that back to me on a test. Where the
Yeah.
investigator says, asks questions, tries to get to the bottom of it, tries to kind of figure out the nuances. And if we can move our brain, and it really is a mind switch. You have to move off of one to the other. And when we move to that curiosity space, it's weird how it changes our own emotions around it. And I think that's part of what I'm, wanting to get at is not only does it help us understand the other side, but it changes our emotional approach to the whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's not so life and death, it's not so existential. We begin to peel away a little bit from the trap of identity where you think, I am a person who believes this. And so any threat to that idea is a threat to me. Well, hang on. Is that true? Do you want to be a person with fixed ideas? Fixed at the level of identity? Like, I don't know, maybe in some places they're really, really strong to that degree, but if you want to learn and you want to stay open to a world that's constantly changing, then maybe soften some of that. And I talk about the analogy being like a smartphone set of apps where you have all the apps on your screen. And if you want to move them around or delete some of them, there's something called wiggle mode that most smartphones have. And the apps begin to shake in place. And that means I can move them. I can, put this one into a group with that other one, or I can delete this one because it's no longer serving me. Same thing. It's like, hold your convictions. They are your convictions. That's great. But let them breathe. Let them wiggle in place when you are in conversation with someone else. Because if you can do that, then you gain this incredible capacity. You're not only able to express your convictions, you're able to receive when someone else expresses theirs. This is the thing that we never think about. It's like we want everyone to hear our convictions, but then we don't work on the skill of hearing other people's convictions. Then how can we expect them to hear us if we can't practice the skill of hearing them? Do you know what I mean? It's a two-way street.
Right. I love that. And I just to talk about, wiggle mode a little bit, it somehow it feels like we're losing if we change our mind on something. Like
Yeah.
somehow like
Yeah.
the conviction that I had when I was 22 years old, I have to carry that until I am in the grave. And like you say, there are certain pieces of us that, yeah, those are set. That's good. And we need to have those kind of bedrock foundational pieces, but it's okay for our views to move and change. And I know for me, I've now moved over into my 50s and I'm looking back and like, oh man, some of the stuff I
Yeah.
thought when I was like in my 20s and 30s, like, what in the goodness gracious were you
Yeah.
doing, man? But, but that's growth. That's learning. That's
That's it.
moving on. And I can't do that if I don't hear your viewpoint too.
Exactly, exactly. And I love that you're underlining this because I think we're afraid of change. We're afraid to change our minds because sometimes we think that we just shouldn't change, that it would be bad for us to change. And this is where there's this thought experiment by my friend David McRaney. He wrote the book on the science of persuasion called How Minds Change. It's extraordinary. And he gives a little thought experiment there, which is, all right, let's say that you're somebody who thinks you shouldn't change, you haven't changed. Would you give the keys to your whole life to yourself from 10 years ago? Like, if you could, I'm 42. If I could give 32-year-old Monica the ability to decide everything for me today, would I do that? Of course not. Because I have changed so much. I have changed since last week. We change all the time. So why are we afraid of change? And not only that, but when I have moments where I change my mind, I'm grateful.
Yes.
Oh, I feel like, oh, I see that now. If I changed my mind, that happened because I wanted my mind to change. It's because something happened that tipped the bucket, and now I'm grateful that I saw the things that I needed to see for that bucket to get tipped. So, why not then look forward to the possibility of being wrong? Like, try that on for size, right? Why not then chase down the opportunities to interact with someone with a different perspective because they are exactly the people most likely to show us where we might be wrong? What if that's not scary but thrilling? What if that's the best way to grow?
Right. I love that. Right.
What if we're not afraid?
And what if we don't change our mind, but we learn something new?
Exactly, which is what happens most of the time because
Right.
changing our mind on big issues happens very infrequently.
Yeah.
Those big issues have roots. Our opinions have roots in our life experiences. When you change your mind on something big, it's a big deal, and it won't happen in the course of the conversation. It'll happen later, like a week later when you're taking a shower or you're driving in the car and you're like, "Oh my gosh," something what got planted that grew. But it almost never happens in that moment. And so the fact that we demand that of each other, you know, I want you to change your mind right now, right here. That's not how this works.
No, no, no,
Oh,
no, no. That needs to go back in some part of my brain that will mull that over while I'm sleeping. It
exactly.
needs to go up in there.
Because I have integrity over what I believe, and so do you.
Right, right. It's so good. Yeah, about a year ago, I live close to San Jose State University, and so walking through campus with a buddy that I went to San Jose State with, back, gosh, 25 years ago. Okay. And it was funny because they had it wasn't a protest, but they had all these booths, and some was for like abolishing prisons and abolishing the police. It's just a typical college campus, right? And all of the things that you would see there. And we walk through and he's like, dude, what's that about? And it's something that I happen to have read up on. And I'm like, well, here's their perspective on things. Oh, and it was one of those just really interesting where I'm grateful, not that I necessarily agreed with their viewpoint, but I'm grateful that I've had listened to somebody to at least understand that's, I'm getting this 80% right. This is probably where this one's coming from.
Yes.
We could go up to the booth and ask if we wanted more info on it. But with that said, and there was, and again, it was just nice to have learned enough that I can, speak quasi intelligently about some of that stuff.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, and you really do learn the kinds of things when you have actual conversations with people that are generous and open and receptive and constructive that you're not going to learn by just hanging out in social media and mostly, listening to the slogans. The slogans are going to flatten a lot. So be careful. Which isn't to say, by the way, some folks on social media do have really nuanced conversations. I don't want to burn them all. It's a bit of a stereotype. Let me not assume.
Right. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Can you just tell us how did the election go with your family 2024? Did you go to your parents' house and watch the results again? And how did that go?
Yeah, 2024, I had folks over my house that were Republican and Democrat. Not my parents because they now live on the other side of the country. But a couple months before the election, there was the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And I was speaking at Vanderbilt University, which selected my book as the freshman college read. And so they had a campus wide debate watch party. My parents, who live in North Carolina, came to watch my talk at Vanderbilt and also came to the debate watch party. So there we were. There we were, surrounded by college students, watching this debate live. And I would just like throw my mom and dad the side eye, with something that Trump said that I just couldn't believe. And they would throw me the side eye when, to their view, like Kamala just, you know, just snaked her way out of a really good point that Trump had made. And like we both just the next morning I was supposed to do I forget what, and I just pushed it off by like an hour because I was with my parents in the hotel room and we were talking about the debate, and it was amazing and like fireworks, and we learned a lot. We found some of the things we had in common. It was really cool. But we still really enjoy that, believe it or not. They visited me here in Seattle just like 3 weeks ago, and we got into it over immigration and due process. And there was a point where I definitely put on my sort of like, I can take on this authoritative air, you know? Just I'm a journalist and I've looked into this, mom and dad, and you should know that no president has ever um ignored the Supreme Court. That's just not something presidents have ever done. And that's how I know that it's really bad, like blah blah blah. And my dad looks at me, he's like, "Do you know that, Monica? Do you know that no president has ever ignored this?" Absolutely. Yes, of course. Look it up later. No, Abraham Lincoln ignored the Supreme Court. And Andrew Jackson definitely ignored the Supreme Court, like in huge ways. So oh gosh, it's what you end up doing, and you feel so foolish. And I apologize, and we try to do that with each other, and that's part of what makes this work. Is we know that in the heat of the moment we're gonna be dumb, you know, and then but then later we're like, oh, that thing you said, it actually stuck with me, and some things I told them really stuck with them, and we've been trading articles back and forth, and it's been great.
That's good. That's good.
So
That's good. And I just have to point out that healing is so important for the relationships that you care about. By
yeah,
healing, I say forgiving and
totally.
acknowledging, dad, mom, spouse, child, whatever.
Yeah.
I got heated. That was not who I want to be. That's not how I want to act. My apologies.
Yep.
If we talk about that subject again, it might happen again, but I will do my best not to let it happen again. Otherwise, you're going to hear
Exactly.
this again from me saying I apologize.
Yeah.
And that takes a certain humility that if we can pull
Right.
that off,
Yeah.
if we can just admit that, man, my emotions got the better of me,
Yeah.
it can allow those conversations to happen again
Yeah.
and hopefully be more healthy the next time. But if not, know that it's
Yeah.
important to have healed.
And honestly, I don't think that there's a single like ingredient that would really like adding in as well as curiosity that can do the most, which is just that grace. It's like we expect ourselves to be perfect, you know, perfect articulators of every point of view, perfectly respectful of everyone at any time. No wonder we're terrified to talk to each other. What we're really scared of is hurting each other. But like, I love that this is a podcast that's about faith, because faith communities understand better than almost anyone that we hurt each other. We're going to keep doing it. We sin against each other. We do wrong, and that's part of what we need to accept. And in some more secular circles, I think sometimes we get caught into a trap that, no, actually, the really good people are never going to do that. So are you a really good person? No, I think that might hurt you. Well, then, get out of the conversation. It's like, no, actually, why do we demand such impossible perfection of each other? Instead, we should be leaning into the cycle of rupture and repair. Rupture and repair. We don't model the repair for each other, so we think it doesn't exist. And so we're so terrified to do any kinds of ruptures, even the smallest ones. But if we don't do the smallest ruptures, it's a sign that we're not having the honest conversations. We should be rupturing. We should be feeling offended by each other's disagreements. Duh. And so then we need to repair. But that's the only way we know that we're really being real with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I do like to say having a healthy understanding of grace is hugely important. And as a, Christian, passing that grace on to others is the key.
It's everything.
I'm not a reservoir for it. I'm a pipe to distribute it. So,
Yeah.
all right, this is my last question for you.
Mhm.
What is exciting you right now? What's one thing going on in your life right now? When you think about it, it makes you smile. It makes joyful. It could be family. It could be work. It could be, something you're reading, anything that's exciting you.
So much.
Not bee stings, something besides bee stings.
No. But you know what? It is my family. I like to say that we're in the chauffeur stage of parenting. So this is the, after I'm done with this podcast and I got to run and get my son to his tennis lesson, then I got to pick him up and take him to his sister's play, and his sister just got to be. But watching my children grow, and it turns out that when parents teach kids, we're reminding ourselves, we're teaching ourselves things that we need to keep being reminded of. I've learned so much humility from my kids. They're my best teachers. It's so fun. And then, me and my husband have disagreements daily on the minutia of parenting. And we have to figure it out because we know that together our parenting brain is stronger than apart. And so it's constant, good conflict. It's really, really good conflict. And it feels like I'm growing every day thanks to them. So I love my family. They're wonderful, very exciting right now.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm on the same page with you on that one. My marriage relationship and our 20-year-old daughter are two of the most refining people in my life. They refine me on the regular, cause me to have to have self-control when we're all in the kitchen at the same time, or any of a number of things. And so I love that. Well, Monica, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I have loved this conversation. It's amazing. And for everybody out there today, let's go live faith first. Hey, you're still here. That is awesome. That means you enjoyed our conversation with Monica Guzmán. What a fun conversation, right? Okay, here's the one thing I want you to think about. I'm sorry to do this to you, but who do you need to forgive for the way they treated you in the middle of a conversation? Or who do you maybe need to apologize for? Sometimes when the emotions get the better of us, we say things we don't really mean. We say things and hurt people in ways that just need to be healed. And so my encouragement to you today is, if there's somebody around a political conversation that just got a little out of hand, rather than abandoning that relationship, go back and try to find a place of healing. Bring back that relationship, because relationships are way more important than any political view that you or your friend might have. So, all right, everybody, let's all go live faith first.